I still remember the morning like it was yesterday, though my hair is streaked with silver and my hands tremble more than they used to. The sun hadn't even climbed over the rooftops when I heard my son's voice behind me, sharp and urgent, slicing through the quiet of my kitchen. "Mom," he said, and there was a strange weight in his tone, one I didn't recognize at first. "I need to show you something." I had been kneeling by the sink, washing yesterday's dishes, steam curling from the warm water, the scent of lemon soap lingering on my hands. I stood slowly, feeling the ache in my knees, and turned. He was holding a folder, thick and heavy, almost too deliberate in its presence. "Is it work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He shook his head. "No, Mom, this is about the house." I froze. The house. My house. The one I had poured my life into, the one that had felt like a fortress against every storm, literal and figurative, since my husband died 10 years ago. The thought of any trouble tied to it knotted my stomach. "Come sit," he said, and he led me to the couch, folder in hand. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting stripes across the carpet, dust motes floating lazily in the air. I noticed how tired he looked, the hollows beneath his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Mom, I want you to understand," he began, voice breaking slightly. "A month ago, I said, this house is yours. I meant it. I still do. I truly do." I blinked. Relief, a warm, heavy weight, sank into me. I remembered that day. He had taken me by the hand, smiled, and said exactly that. I had laughed through tears and hugged him tight, feeling that perhaps, finally, the fear of being alone in this world might ease. But the moment stretched too long, and the lines in his forehead deepened. "But, things have changed." "Changed?" I echoed, the words catching in my throat. My hands gripped the fabric of my skirt. My stomach dropped like I had just stepped off a cliff without warning. He opened the folder. Inside were documents, signatures, dates, the kind of sterile language that can destroy a heart with ink alone. "I had to take legal steps, Mom. It's complicated." I shook my head. "Legal steps? What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I had to protect myself. And protect you too, in a way you might not understand right now." I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Maybe both. My chest tightened. The kitchen smelled faintly of the coffee he'd left on the counter, bitter and warming, but it did nothing to steady the storm inside me. "Son, you're scaring me," I whispered. "I know, Mom. I know," he said softly. Then he looked away, out the window, at the maple trees shaking in a gentle morning wind. I could see the conflict etched across his face. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. I had to go to court. The words landed like stones in my chest. "Court?" I repeated, voice trembling. My hands, now resting on my lap, were cold. "But," we agreed. "You said the house was mine. You promised." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back slightly. Not out of anger, though there was plenty, but because my mind was racing. How could this be happening? How could the son who held my hand and smiled at me, who promised me security in my old age, now bring this kind of chaos into my life? "I didn't want it to come to this," he said. "You have to believe me." But circumstances changed faster than I could handle. I closed my eyes, letting the silence fill the room. The ticking of the old clock on the wall sounded like gunfire in my ears. The coffee cup steamed, forgotten. My memories of raising him, watching him grow from a boy into a man, clashed violently with this moment, this betrayal, or maybe protection. I wasn't sure which it was yet. "Mom," he said, voice softer now, almost pleading, "I love you. I always have. This isn't about that." It's about ensuring that what's yours stays safe. I opened my eyes and studied him. There was sincerity there, yes, but also fear. And fear can twist love into something unrecognizable. Safe from what? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. He swallowed hard. From people who might try to take advantage. From family complications. There's more at stake than you realize. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I thought about the past, about those nights after my husband died, when I would sit alone in the living room, the walls echoing with memories and silence. I had kept this house together with nothing but love, sweat, and stubbornness. Now, my son, the one I had raised with every ounce of hope I had left, was saying that love alone wasn't enough. I don't understand, I whispered. All these years, I've trusted you. Trusted that you'd honor your word. And now you're saying I have to fight for what's already mine. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, and I saw a kind of sorrow I hadn't anticipated. I'm sorry, Mom, he said finally. I really am. But I had to. Please, try to understand. I didn't know if I could. My mind spun back to the moment he said, "This house is yours." That promise had wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and now the blanket was ripped away, leaving me exposed to a cold, unfamiliar wind. I felt tears sting my eyes, hot and sudden. Not just because of the house, but because the person I trusted most in the world was suddenly on the other side of a line I didn't even see being drawn. I remembered the laughter we had shared in this living room, the quiet Sunday mornings with toast and tea, the small victories of life that had built this home into something sacred. And now, all of it seemed fragile, like glass in the hand of a child. Mom, he said again, a whisper now, almost a caress, but it didn't reach the anger and confusion swelling inside me. I promise, I didn't want this. I'm only trying to protect you. Protect me. I echoed, voice breaking. From what? From my own son. He didn't answer, and the room filled with silence again. Only the clock ticked, relentless, reminding me that time didn't wait, that decisions had already been made, papers filed, wheels in motion. I looked around the room, at the photographs lining the mantelpiece, family gatherings, birthdays, holidays. My husband's smiling face in one frame, our children running through the garden in another. Memories that had once been comforting now felt like taunts, reminders of everything I might lose. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the betrayal, there was a flicker of understanding. Life had a way of forcing choices, of presenting moral and emotional puzzles that no one could navigate perfectly. My son had always been headstrong, protective in ways I didn't always understand. Perhaps this was another manifestation of that, twisted, painful, but somehow consistent with who he had become. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The warmth of the morning sun touched my cheek, the scent of lemon and coffee still lingering. My son's hand hovered near mine, hesitant. I reached out slowly, letting him feel my presence, letting him know that despite the shock, despite the hurt, we were still connected. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The warmth of the morning sun touched my cheek, the scent of lemon and coffee still lingering. My son's hand hovered near mine, hesitant. I reached out slowly, letting him feel my presence, letting him know that despite the shock, despite the hurt, we were still connected. I don't know if I can understand right now, I said softly. But I will try. Because you're my son, and that counts for something, even when I don't like what's happening. He nodded, relief flickering across his face, mingled with lingering guilt. Thank you, Mom. That's all I can ask. And in that moment, sitting on the couch in the early morning light, I realized that this house, my home, was more than walls and a roof. It was memory, trust, love, and sometimes, heartbreak. And no matter what legal papers said, no matter what the court decided, those things no one could take from me. I just didn't know yet if that would be enough. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and quiet observation. My son came by almost every morning, but the warmth of our previous conversations had been replaced with a careful politeness, as if both of us were walking on thin ice. I kept the curtains drawn, letting sunlight filter through in muted streaks, because even the brightness of the day felt intrusive. One afternoon, I was in the garden, tending to the rose bushes my husband had planted decades ago, when I felt it, the creeping suspicion that nothing would ever be the same again. The soil was dry under my fingers, the scent of earth mingling with the faint perfume of blossoms, and I found myself gripping the spade too tightly, letting my frustration spill over into the act of digging. "I can't believe this," I muttered under my breath. "Mom?" My son's voice startled me. He had appeared silently at the garden gate, folding his arms, watching me like he was weighing the consequences of saying anything. I straightened, brushing dirt from my hands. "It's nothing," I lied, though the tremor in my voice betrayed me. He stepped closer. "I know this is hard, but the lawyer said the first hearing is next week. I wanted to tell you in person." I inhaled sharply, the scent of roses overwhelming me. "Hearing? Next week?" My mind reeled. "You didn't even give me a chance to talk, to prepare. You just filed the papers." "I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I thought, maybe if we explained it, if we were careful, it would be easier." I laughed, bitterly, a hollow sound that seemed too loud in the quiet garden. "Easier? For whom? For you? Because I can tell you, it's not easy for me at all." He flinched but remained where he was. "Mom." I thought I was protecting both of us. I wanted to shout, to throw the spade across the yard and break something, anything, just to release the heat building inside me. Instead, I sank to the edge of the garden bench, feeling the cool wood press against my thighs. My son sat down beside me, careful to keep his distance, as if even being near me carried a risk. "I keep thinking about that day," I said after a long pause. "When you told me this house was mine. I trusted you, son. I believed every word." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I know. I haven't forgotten it, Mom. I don't. I don't want you to think I've forgotten." "I don't know what to think," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I feel betrayed, yes. But also, scared. Scared that everything I've built, everything I've lived for, could be taken from me." He reached for my hand again, hesitated, then let it rest lightly on mine. The gesture was gentle, but I could feel the distance between us growing, invisible but real. "I wish I could make this right without all of this," he said. "But I can't. I had to follow the advice I was given, the legal advice. They said it was the only way to make sure everything stays in your name." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that no law, no paper, no courtroom could ever replace trust. But instead, I just sat there, the roses rustling in the wind, and let the tears come. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. I thought about my husband, about the life we had built together, about the countless hours spent making this house a home. And I realized that the house was never just about the walls or the roof. It was about memories, about family, about trust. The next morning, the mail brought the first real shock, a thick envelope stamped from the court. I opened it with trembling hands. There it was, black and white and merciless, the formal notification of the legal proceedings, the dates, the names, the demands. My stomach churned. I wanted to tear it up, burn it, pretend it didn't exist, but I couldn't. The law doesn't forgive ignorance. When my son arrived later that day, I barely looked at him. He placed the folder on the kitchen table, neatly aligned with the edge, as though precision could make the situation easier to bear. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly. "I wish I could have avoided this, truly. I don't know if I can face this, son, I said, my voice breaking. I feel like the world has shifted under my feet. He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. Instead, I let him hold it, the warmth of his palm grounding me, even if it could not undo what had been set in motion. You've always been strong, Mom, he said. You've faced everything with courage. I hope you can face this too. Strength. Courage. Words that once gave me comfort now felt like a burden. I thought of all the times I had been brave, standing alone at my husband's funeral, managing the bills, making every tough decision to keep this family afloat. And yet, this betrayal, this courtroom, this legal struggle, felt like it might be the one battle I could not win. In the days that followed, I began to notice small changes in my routine. I double-checked locks, reviewed financial statements, and spoke to friends who had navigated legal disputes. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle in the attic, seemed louder, more ominous. I would sit in the living room, tracing my fingers along the spines of photo albums, smelling the faint aroma of my husband's old pipe tobacco, wondering if the memories themselves could shield me from reality. My son tried to help, tried to reassure me. But I could see the strain in his eyes. He was torn between love and duty, between wanting to protect me and having to enforce the law. Each time he left, I felt both relief and emptiness, a hollow echo of the closeness we had once shared. One evening, I overheard him on the phone, his voice low, hurried, almost pleading. I don't know how to do this without hurting her, he said. Yes, the papers are filed. I know. I know it's breaking her heart. I stood in the hallway, listening, a lump in my throat. Hearing him admit his struggle did not ease the pain. It made it sharper. I realized then that the conflict wasn't just about the house. It was about trust, about love, about the invisible threads that connect family. And those threads were fraying. Days turned into weeks. The tension in the house became almost tangible. I could feel it pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I tried to keep myself busy, cooking, gardening, reading, but every task was shadowed by the impending court date. I would catch my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the weary, lined face staring back at me. Yet, in the quiet moments, I clung to memories. I remembered my husband's laugh echoing down the stairs, my children's footsteps running across the living room floor, the smell of baking bread wafting through the kitchen. Those moments, fleeting as they were, reminded me of who I was and who my family had been. I realized that no matter what happened in court, those memories, those bonds, could never be erased. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at me. I didn't know if I was preparing to fight or to forgive. Every night, I prayed, not for victory or for the law to favor me, but for understanding, for the strength to face the truth, whatever it might be. And then, one afternoon, as I was dusting the shelves in the living room, my son came in with a letter in his hand. His eyes were red, his expression strained. "Mom, it's from the court," he said. I braced myself, gripping the edge of the table. My heart pounded. The air smelled faintly of old wood and polished brass, familiar yet charged with tension. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, bracing for whatever new twist awaited me. Inside was a notice for mediation before the actual court hearing. A chance to talk, to explain, to perhaps reconcile before the law became the final judge. Relief washed over me, tempered by the awareness that this would be painful. We would have to confront each other, face the words, the intentions, the missteps. I looked up at my son, his expression unreadable. And in that moment, I realized something: the fight wasn't just about a house. It was about trust, about love, about the complicated, messy ties that bound a family together. And as much as it scared me, I knew I had to step forward, even if my legs shook and my heart raced, even if every memory threatened to crumble under the weight of reality. Because this was my life, my home, my family. And whatever happened next, I had to face it, not just for the house, but for the bond that had, somehow, survived this far. The day of the mediation arrived with an overcast sky, thick clouds hanging low over the neighborhood. I remember thinking how fitting it was, the air heavy, the light muted, as if the world itself understood the weight I was carrying. My son arrived early, as usual, though he didn't smile this time. His eyes were tight, anxious, and I could feel a quiet storm brewing in both of us. We drove in silence, the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt louder than any conversation could be. Every so often, I glanced at him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. He tried to meet my gaze once, briefly, as if seeking reassurance, but I looked away. I wasn't ready to give it. At the mediation office, the room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, the scent oddly comforting in its neutrality. We sat across from a neutral mediator, a woman in her 40s with calm eyes and a soft voice that tried to put the chaos of our lives into neat sentences. "Thank you both for coming," she said, her tone professional but kind. "Our goal today is to talk openly and find a path forward." I swallowed hard. Talk. Openly. That felt impossible. My son had betrayed me, or at least that's how it felt, and now I was expected to sit and discuss it as though it were a normal conversation over tea. "I suppose we can begin," he said quietly, his eyes flicking toward mine. I felt a jolt of something, guilt, perhaps, or sorrow, radiate from him. I nodded stiffly, letting the mediator guide us through the first tentative words. He spoke first, carefully measured. "Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. I thought giving the house to you, then taking these legal steps, would protect you. I see now that it's caused pain instead." I wanted to stand, shake him, demand answers, but instead I took a deep breath and said, "Pain? Son, this isn't just pain. It's confusion, betrayal. You promised me the house, and now I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own life." He flinched slightly but didn't interrupt. I could see the weight of guilt pressing down on him, shaping every feature of his face. "I know," he said softly. "I understand why you feel that way." Understanding. The word felt hollow, almost cruel in its simplicity. How could someone understand the quiet, nightly terror that had gripped me since receiving that first court notice? How could he understand the nights spent staring at the ceiling, imagining a life where the home I loved could be taken from me by the son I had raised? The mediator leaned forward. "It's important to focus on what each of you needs and what's truly at stake," she said. "Mrs. Thompson, can you tell us what you hope to achieve here?" I took a breath, letting the words form carefully. "I want clarity. I want trust restored, if that's even possible. And I want to feel safe in my own home. That's all. Not revenge, not money, just safety and respect." My son's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the boy he had once been, the one who would hide behind the curtains to surprise me on birthdays, who had clutched my hand in the dark after bad dreams. That memory was both comforting and painful. "I want that too, Mom," he said quietly. "I want us to be able to trust each other again. That's why I suggested mediation. I don't want this to destroy us." I let his words sink in. I wanted to believe him, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. The betrayal felt too real, too close, even with the calm environment and the mediator's gentle prompts. We went back and forth, carefully untangling the web of intentions, misunderstandings, and legal necessities. He explained the advice he had received, the fears of potential outside interference, the risks to my financial security. And I listened, the anger coiling in my chest like a snake, every fiber of my being screaming against the logic he presented. "I didn't realize it would feel like this," he said at one point, his voice cracking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I see now. I've hurt you more than I could have imagined." I felt tears prick my eyes. I wanted to reach across the table and tell him it was okay, that I could forgive, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could. The house had always been a symbol of stability, a witness to decades of love and loss, and now it felt like the battleground for a rift I didn't know how to bridge. When we took a short break, I wandered to the window, looking out at the grey sky and the bare trees lining the street. The wind stirred the branches, scratching at the panes, and I realized how fragile life felt, how easily the ground could shift beneath your feet. My son came up behind me quietly, his presence almost hesitant. "Mom," he said, softly. I didn't turn. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. But I love you, and I want to fix this, somehow." I closed my eyes and felt the ache in my chest deepen. "I know you love me," I whispered. "But love isn't always enough, son. Not when it's tangled with fear, legalities, and promises broken." He nodded, and I could see the tears glimmering at the corners of his eyes. "I understand. I don't know what to do next." "Neither do I admitted. "And maybe that's the truth we have to face, together, painfully, honestly. Maybe we can't erase what's happened, but perhaps we can find a way forward." We returned to the mediation room with a tentative truce, the kind that feels fragile but necessary. The mediator guided us through options, compromises, and hypothetical solutions, but every suggestion felt like a reminder of what had already been broken. By the time we left the office, the clouds had begun to part slightly, pale light spilling over the sidewalks. I looked at my son, who avoided my gaze, and I realized that whatever happened next, the dynamic between us had shifted irreversibly. We were no longer just mother and son, we were participants in a legal and emotional struggle that would leave traces long after the papers were signed. Driving home, the silence was heavier than before. The house loomed at the end of the street, familiar yet alien. I could feel its presence like a pulse, steady and unyielding, reminding me that it had witnessed more than any court could understand. That night, I sat by the living room window, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, smelling the faint aroma of baked bread lingering from my attempt at dinner. I thought about the confrontation in the mediation, about the words spoken and unspoken, about the fragile truce we had cobbled together. And I realized something: life would always test trust, love, and patience. My son had made choices that hurt me, yes, but he had also tried to navigate a world that demanded impossible decisions. My task, for now, was not revenge, not surrender, but understanding, and survival. I had to find strength, not just for the house, but for the legacy of family, memory, and resilience that it represented. As I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, I felt the weight of the coming days pressing down. Court would come, decisions would be made, and our relationship would be tested in ways I could not yet predict. Yet beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, I clung to a fragile hope, that perhaps love, even strained and complicated, could survive this trial. And as I lay in bed, the ceiling dark and silent above me, I whispered a quiet prayer, not for victory, not for revenge, but for the courage to face whatever came next, with honesty, with strength, and with the stubborn, enduring heart of a mother who had already weathered more storms than most could imagine. The days after the mediation felt like walking through fog. The house itself seemed quieter, almost watchful, as if it could sense the tension humming through the air. I found myself checking the locks more often, counting doors and windows with obsessive care. Every sound, the clatter of dishes, the creak of floorboards, made my pulse jump. It wasn't paranoia, I told myself. It was awareness. Survival. My son came over that afternoon, holding a folder again, his expression tight and formal. "Mom," he began, hesitantly, "I thought we could go over the documents before the hearing. Just prepare ourselves." I took the folder from him, but I didn't open it right away. I wanted to feel the weight in my hands, to remind myself that these papers, these symbols of betrayal and protection, were real. They were not the end of the world, but they were part of it, a proof of the chasm that had grown between us. Why did it have to come to this? I asked, finally, voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't want it to, he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I really didn't. But the advice I got, they said there was no other way to ensure the house stayed in your name. Advice? I echoed, gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles whitened. This is my home, my life. And you needed advice to know what was right. He flinched. Mom. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. I looked at him, searching for the boy I once knew, the one who had clutched my hand in the dark, who had laughed with me at stupid jokes, who had cried after scraped knees. I could see remnants of that boy, buried under the layers of adult caution, fear, and responsibility. But the man before me, the one holding this folder like a shield, was someone I didn't fully recognize. You're scared, I said, softly, almost to myself. That's why you did it, isn't it? You were scared of losing me, of losing the house, of something. He lowered his gaze, nodding slowly. Yes. I didn't know how else to handle it. I thought if I took legal steps, everything would be safer. For both of us. Safer? I asked, incredulous. You call this safer? This tension, this fear, this betrayal? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the folder and laid out papers carefully, like a chess player arranging pieces. Legal documents, affidavits, and notes from his lawyer stared back at me, black and white and unyielding. I need you to understand, he said finally, that none of this is about taking the house from you. It's about securing it. About preventing anyone else from trying to interfere. It's about you. About protecting your life's work. I wanted to scream. To cry. To collapse into his arms and demand explanations. But I stayed quiet, letting the words wash over me. They made sense, logically. But emotionally, they were daggers. I had trusted him. I had believed him when he said the house was mine. And now, all of it felt like a setup, a careful plan that had both love and betrayal baked into it. You've turned our lives upside down, I said, my voice trembling. I feel like a stranger in my own home. I know, Mom, he said, voice low, almost breaking. I see that now. I didn't realize how much this would hurt you. I thought it would help. We sat in silence for a long moment. The afternoon light slanted through the window, highlighting dust motes floating lazily in the air. I traced the rim of my teacup, feeling its warmth, smelling the faint hint of chamomile, and I thought about all the years I had spent in this house, the birthdays, the holidays, the quiet Sunday mornings filled with the smell of fresh bread. All of it had been for this home, and now it felt precarious, fragile, and uncertain. Finally, I spoke. Do you understand what this feels like? To hear that the person you raised, the person you trusted most, went behind your back. He looked down, silent. The weight of guilt in his posture was almost unbearable to witness. I know. I see that. And I'm sorry, Mom. I truly am. The apology hit me, but it didn't soften the edges of my pain. Love and betrayal are strange companions. They walk hand in hand until one falters, and then the other falls hard. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it would be okay, that we could mend this. But I also wanted to scream at him for taking this path without me, for turning my sanctuary into a battlefield. Days passed. The tension built like a storm about to break. The house seemed to sense it, each creak of the floors a reminder of fragility, each shadow a whisper of the looming court date. I found myself wandering the rooms at odd hours, touching walls, tracing the edges of furniture, grounding myself in the physical reality of the home that had become a symbol of everything I feared losing. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. It was my son, holding another envelope, this one stamped urgent. I knew before opening it what it would say: new court dates, filings, legal maneuvers. My hands shook as I slit the envelope, revealing the latest demands. My stomach churned, a hollow pit opening beneath me. He watched me silently, his eyes full of apology, of fear, of helplessness. "Mom. I didn't want this," he said softly. "I wish there was another way." I turned to him, tears welling. "Do you know how it feels to sit here, day after day, wondering if your life can be taken from you by the person you trusted most?" "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I wish I could make it right. I don't. I don't know how." I realized then that we were trapped in a cycle of love and pain, neither able to fully protect the other from the consequences of their own decisions. And yet, despite everything, I saw his heart in that moment, broken, regretful, trying to bridge a chasm that had already opened between us. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. The world outside was blurred and wet, indistinct. And I thought about life, about all the years I had poured into this family, into this home, into raising children who were meant to love and protect, not wound and confuse. I realized that love is not always enough. That trust, once broken, can take lifetimes to mend. But I also realized that bitterness and anger would destroy more than the papers or the legal maneuvers ever could. I had a choice: to let this situation consume me, or to face it with the stubborn endurance that had carried me through decades of life's storms. And so, I resolved, quietly, in the dim light of the rain-soaked evening, to endure. To navigate the pain, the betrayal, and the looming courtroom with eyes wide open, heart weary but unbroken. For this house, for the memories it held, for the life I had built, and for the son I still loved, even if it hurt to do so. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within, yet I clung to a fragile hope that even through this, we might find our way back to some semblance of understanding. The coming days would be difficult, every conversation, every step toward the courtroom a test of patience, of love, of resilience. And as I turned off the light and climbed the stairs, I felt the weight of both fear and determination pressing on me. Life, I knew, would not wait for me to gather courage. The house, the court, my son, everything demanded action, understanding, and the endurance of a heart that had already weathered too many storms to falter now. The morning of the court hearing arrived cold and grey, the kind of day that presses on your chest before you even step outside. I dressed carefully, choosing a modest outfit, neutral colors, something that would keep the focus on me and not on theatrics. My hands shook as I buttoned my cardigan, and I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, a weary, lined face staring back at me. A face that had endured grief, loss, and now, the unimaginable, the son I had raised taking legal action against me, however carefully he tried to frame it as protection. My son was already in the car when I stepped outside. He looked as tense as I felt, though he tried to offer a small, apologetic smile. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though the word felt hollow. Ready was a lie. Nothing about this situation made anyone ready. Not for confrontation. Not for betrayal. Not for the emotional weight of years of love twisted into legal papers. The courthouse was imposing, cold stone and metal, a building that seemed to swallow hope and spit out anxiety. I held my son's hand briefly in the parking lot, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that still existed, fragile as it was. The walk inside felt endless, each step heavier than the last, echoing against the marble floors. In the courtroom, everything smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. The air was thick with the scent of nervous energy. I took a seat, my hands folded tightly in my lap, and tried to steady my breath. My son sat beside me, stiff and formal, and I noticed the tremor in his fingers, mirrored in my own. The judge entered, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that demanded attention. She scanned the room, and the session began with procedural formalities, the kind of rigid language that makes emotions feel almost irrelevant. But beneath the words, the tension between my son and me was tangible, pulsing through the room like an invisible current. The mediator from our previous session was present, taking notes and occasionally leaning toward the judge to explain points of context. But despite her presence, despite all the protocols, the room felt charged, like a powder keg waiting for a spark. My son's lawyer spoke first, laying out the case with precision. Your Honor, the petitioner seeks to ensure the property remains under their mother's control. These legal steps were advised to prevent any third-party interference and safeguard the mother's assets. I listened, my throat tight, feeling a mix of fury and helplessness. Protect me? Secure me? That had been his stated goal, yes, but had it needed to come in the form of legal action that felt like betrayal? I glanced at him, his face pale, eyes focused on the table, jaw tight. He had done this to protect me, or at least that's what he claimed, but the impact on me was undeniable. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on me. Your Honor, I began, voice trembling but firm, this house is my life's work. My husband and I built it with our hands, our love, and our memories. I have raised my children here, celebrated their milestones, and tried to provide a home of stability and warmth. The legal steps taken by my son were unnecessary and hurtful, despite his stated intentions. I love him, but I feel betrayed. I looked at my son as the words left my mouth. I saw the flicker of regret, the shadow of pain. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and for a moment, the room shrank, leaving just the two of us suspended between words unspoken. The hearing went on for hours, legal language colliding with raw emotion. My son was called to speak, and I could see the internal struggle etched into his features. Mom, he said softly, voice carrying through the sterile courtroom, I truly did not want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. I see now how wrong that was, how much pain it caused. I felt a tear escape, sliding down my cheek, and I swallowed hard to keep my voice steady. Son, protection is love. But love does not come wrapped in betrayal. You could have spoken to me, trusted me, included me. Instead, you acted alone. He lowered his head, shame evident in every line of his posture. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. I thought this was the only way to keep you safe. The judge nodded, listening attentively. There was no judgment in her face, only a calm assessment of facts, but I could feel the emotional currents between us like invisible waves, threatening to pull us under. After what felt like an eternity, the session ended, and we left the courtroom into the late afternoon chill. The sky was pale gray, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. My son walked beside me in silence, both of us exhausted, physically and emotionally. In the car, he finally spoke. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I tried, but I can't undo what's been done. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of sorrow, love, and exasperation. You can't undo it, I said softly. But you can try to understand it. To understand how it feels to be on the receiving end of decisions made in the name of love. That's the start. We drove home, the house looming at the end of the street, familiar yet strange, like a memory you can't quite place. I knew the legal battle was far from over. Papers would be filed, hearings scheduled, decisions made. But I also knew something else. The bond between a mother and son is not so easily erased. It is tested, stretched, bent, but not always broken. That night, I walked through the rooms of my home, touching walls, tracing photo frames, feeling the pulse of the life I had built. Memories surged, the birthdays, the holidays, quiet mornings with tea and bread, laughter echoing through hallways. And amidst the pain, the betrayal, the legal maneuvers, I found something enduring, the sense that love, however strained, could survive even this. I knew the coming weeks would be the hardest. Confrontations, court dates, emotional reckonings awaited. But I also knew that I had weathered storms before, loss, grief, fear, and I could endure this too. Not because it would be easy, but because life demanded resilience, honesty, and the stubborn heart of someone who had lived fully and loved deeply. As I climbed the stairs to bed, I whispered a quiet prayer, not for victory in court, but for courage, clarity, and the strength to face my son and my own emotions with honesty. Whatever the outcome, I promised myself I would remain grounded in the memories, the love, and the resilience that had brought me this far. The day of the second hearing felt heavier than the first, the kind of morning where even the air seems reluctant to move. I dressed carefully, selecting a muted dress that made me feel both presentable and anchored, like armor for the heart. My son met me at the door, looking pale and tense, and I could see the storm he carried in his eyes, the same storm I carried in mine. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade cold and imposing. We walked inside in silence, each step echoing through the marble halls. I felt every footfall, every heartbeat, a drumbeat warning that the confrontation I had been dreading was inevitable. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was taut, almost electric. The judge entered promptly, her expression calm but firm, and the proceedings began. This time, the focus was not just procedural. Witnesses had been called. Documents presented. Statements read aloud. Each word, each declaration, felt like a blade cutting through the fragile trust that remained between my son and me. When my son was called to testify, I watched him approach the stand, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. He looked back at me once, a fleeting glance filled with apology and fear, and I saw the boy I had raised, now grown into a man burdened by responsibility and regret. "Mom," he said softly, during a pause in the testimony, "I didn't want this to happen. I tried to protect you, to protect your home, our family. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand why the boy I trusted had become someone who required legal intervention to manage his love for me. Instead, I stood firm, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. Protection, I said, does not come in the form of betrayal. You could have spoken to me, trusted me, included me. You chose to act alone, and now we stand here, bound by words on paper and court decisions, not by love." He swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edges of the stand. I know, Mom. I see that now. I didn't understand how much this would hurt you. The mediator tried to steer the discussion back to resolution, but the tension between us was too raw, too immediate. Every argument, every explanation felt like it widened the chasm rather than bridging it. I felt my chest tighten, the sting of tears pressing behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Throughout the morning, the lawyers presented their cases, citing legal precedents and advice that had led my son to file the papers. But beneath the sterile legal language, the courtroom vibrated with emotion, love, guilt, fear, and the weight of decades of shared history now fractured by decisions made in isolation. At one point, the judge paused and looked at us both, her gaze steady. "It's clear that this situation has caused deep emotional strain for both parties. While the legal issues are significant, it's equally important to consider the familial relationships at stake." Her words struck me like a bell. Familial relationships at stake. Not just property. Not just law. But the invisible bonds between mother and son, frayed but not entirely broken. I felt a surge of both sorrow and determination. This wasn't just about a house. It was about the trust, love, and shared history that no legal document could fully capture. During a recess, I stepped outside for air, the cold wind biting my cheeks. I could see my son following, hesitant, almost fearful. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm trying. I really am. I don't want to lose us." I turned to face him, the wind whipping my hair across my face. "Son, we're already at the edge. You've already hurt me in ways that words alone can't undo. But that doesn't mean it's too late to try." He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I don't know if I can fix everything, but I want to try. Back inside, the hearing resumed. The tension mounted as witnesses gave testimony, the lawyer's words sharp, factual, yet carrying the undercurrent of moral complexity. I felt the emotional weight of every statement, the sting of every implication. Each word reminded me that love, even when genuine, can be twisted by fear and misunderstanding into actions that wound. Finally, it was my turn to give a closing statement. I stood, hands clasped loosely, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Your Honor, I began, this house is more than walls and a roof. It is memory, history, and love. Yes, legal safeguards are important, but they cannot replace the trust between a mother and her son. I do not wish to punish him, nor to gain material advantage. I seek only understanding, reconciliation, and the hope that what has been broken can be mended. I looked at my son. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I felt the years of care, guidance, and shared life stretch across the courtroom, fragile but present. We have both made mistakes, I said softly, but we are still bound by something stronger than legal documents, family. The judge nodded, her expression thoughtful. This case presents both legal and emotional complexities. I will take all statements under consideration and provide a ruling that seeks to balance the interests of both parties and the preservation of family bonds. As we left the courtroom, the day had darkened. Rain streaked the windows of the courthouse, a mirror to the tumultuous emotions we carried inside. My son and I walked silently to the car, each of us lost in thought. He reached for my hand, and I allowed him to hold it. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like a bridge, tenuous but real, connecting two hearts that had been strained almost beyond endurance. That night, I sat in the living room, tracing the spines of photo albums, feeling the weight of history, love, and betrayal all at once. The house, my home, seemed to pulse around me, familiar yet transformed by the events that had unfolded within its walls. I knew the legal outcome was uncertain, but I also knew that the strength of our bond, though tested, could endure. And as I climbed the stairs to my room, I whispered a quiet prayer, not for victory, but for understanding, for the courage to face whatever came next, for the patience to navigate the complexities of love and family, and for the strength to hold on to the memories and bonds that had carried me through so many storms before. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, yet I felt a fragile hope. Perhaps love, even when fractured by fear and misjudgment, could survive. Perhaps my son and I could find our way back to trust, step by delicate step. And perhaps, in the end, that fragile hope would be enough. The day the court issued its decision was clear and crisp, the sunlight spilling into the city streets like a promise, yet carrying with it the weight of everything that had come before. My son arrived early, his face pale but determined, and I could see in his eyes the exhaustion of weeks of tension, confrontation, and unspoken guilt. We sat in the car for a moment, neither of us speaking, the quiet stretching between us like a taut wire. Finally, he spoke. Mom, whatever happens, I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I took a deep breath, the air tasting faintly of autumn leaves and exhaust, and I nodded. I know, son. I've never doubted that, even when I felt betrayed. The courthouse was less intimidating today, though the anxiety in my chest remained. Inside, the judge called our case, and the tension was immediate, the same tight coil I had felt for weeks. I gripped my son's hand lightly, feeling the tremor in his fingers mirror my own. The judge spoke clearly, without flourish, her voice calm yet authoritative. After reviewing all documents, testimonies, and considering the familial relationship at stake, the court finds that the property in question shall remain under the ownership of Mrs. Thompson. Legal safeguards may be maintained to ensure clarity and protection, but the intent and control remain with the original owner. Relief surged through me, almost physically, like the sun breaking through a clouded sky. I let out a shaky breath, and my son exhaled alongside me, the tension between us softening, though not entirely disappearing. "Mom," he whispered, eyes glistening. I'm so sorry for everything." I turned to him, seeing the vulnerability, the remorse, the weight of choices made in fear. "Son, I know you acted out of love, however misguided. And I know it hurt me. But I also know you tried, in your own way, to protect me. That matters, even if it doesn't erase the pain." He swallowed hard, nodding, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I was terrified, Mom. I thought if I didn't do this, something worse might happen. I see now that it almost broke us instead." I reached across the small space between us, taking his hands in mine. "It didn't break us," I said softly. "It tested us. And now we can rebuild. Slowly. Carefully. Together." The drive home was quiet, but lighter than it had been in weeks. The tension in the air had shifted, replaced by a tentative hope. The house loomed ahead, familiar yet carrying the echoes of what had been confrontation, fear, and misunderstanding. But it also carried the promise of continuity, of memories preserved, of love that could endure even through conflict. Once inside, I walked through each room deliberately, touching walls, tracing the edges of furniture, inhaling the sense of home, the faint aroma of polished wood, old paper, lingering cooking smells. Everything felt both familiar and renewed, a reminder of the life that had continued despite everything. My son followed me, hesitant, almost timid, as though afraid to disrupt the fragile peace. I turned to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've learned something in this process," I said quietly. "And I've learned something too. Love and trust are fragile. But they are worth protecting, and worth repairing, no matter the mistakes made along the way." He nodded, a small, tremulous smile breaking through his anxiety. "I promise, Mom. I'll do better. I'll never let fear dictate my actions against the people I love." We spent the rest of the day together, not discussing the court or the legal papers, but simply being in the home we shared. We moved through the rooms, sharing quiet memories, laughing softly at old anecdotes, letting the weight of the past weeks settle without crushing us. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, I sat by the living room window, my son beside me. We watched the neighborhood bathe in the fading light, the air crisp and fragrant with autumn leaves. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the residue of fear, betrayal, and relief, but it was tempered by a profound sense of connection, of endurance, and of love restored. I spoke softly, almost to myself. "Life has a way of testing us, son. Of making us confront our worst fears and our deepest vulnerabilities. But it also teaches us something invaluable, that love, when genuine, can survive even the harshest trials. That forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. And that family, despite everything, is worth every effort, every painful step toward understanding." He leaned against me, his hand brushing mine, and I felt a warmth that no legal paper or courtroom decree could quantify. The bond between us, though shaken, was alive and resilient. As night fell, I walked through the house once more, feeling the pulse of memories and shared history in every corner. The photographs on the mantel, the worn furniture, the faint scent of my husband's favorite pipe, it all reminded me of the life we had built, the love that had been tested, and the lessons we had learned. Sitting back down, I reflected on the journey, the fear, the betrayal, the court hearings, the tension that had threatened to sever the ties between us. And I realized that the most important inheritance I could leave my family was not material, not even legal, but the knowledge that love, trust, and forgiveness are the pillars of any enduring family. That mistakes will be made, fears will drive misguided actions, and yet, with honesty and heart, bonds can be repaired. I looked at my son, the man who had caused me such pain yet never ceased to love me, and I whispered, "We've weathered the storm, son. And now, we begin again." He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us, and in that moment, I knew the future was not without challenges, but it was ours to face, together. And as the night settled over the house, I felt a sense of peace, fragile yet profound. The house, my home, remained not just a building of brick and wood, but a repository of memories, love, and resilience. And within its walls, my son and I had found our way back to one another, scarred but stronger, bound by the enduring force of family. The weeks that followed the court's decision were quieter, softer, though not without their own adjustments. My son and I navigated our relationship carefully, each interaction a delicate dance between past pain and renewed trust. There were moments of laughter again, quiet conversations over tea, and even arguments, small, human disagreements, but the shadow of betrayal that had loomed so large began to lift, replaced by understanding. I often found myself in the garden, tending to the roses my husband had planted, letting the earth ground me in the present. The flowers bloomed, fragile yet persistent, and I thought of them as metaphors for our family, resilience amidst storms, beauty despite hardship. My son would sometimes join me, kneeling beside me in the soil, silent but present, sharing the labor without needing to fill it with words. In those moments, the weight of the past weeks seemed to dissipate, replaced by quiet companionship. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the branches, I found myself speaking aloud, more to the air than to anyone else. "You know, life doesn't come with guarantees," I said softly. "It tests you. It breaks your heart. It forces you to confront your own weaknesses and the weaknesses of those you love. But it also teaches you something invaluable, the strength to endure, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to cherish what truly matters." My son watched me, his expression attentive, and I felt a surge of gratitude that, despite everything, he was still here. Still present. Still willing to rebuild what had been fractured. That evening, we sat in the living room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of our home. The photographs of our family, the faint scent of evening tea, the soft hum of the city outside, it all reminded me of what we had fought for, not just legally, but emotionally. I took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the journey we had endured together. "Son," I said, my voice steady, "I want you to remember this. Homes, houses, possessions, they can all be replaced. But the love, trust, and memories we share cannot be measured by paper or law. They are ours. And they are worth every effort to protect, to nurture, and to rebuild when they are damaged." He nodded, his hands folded in his lap, eyes glistening. "I understand, Mom. I've learned more than I ever imagined I would from this ordeal. I promise to honor that, always." I smiled faintly, the faint lines of worry easing from my face. "I know you will, son. I know you will. And that is the greatest comfort I could have." In the quiet that followed, I reflected on the entire journey, the shock of betrayal, the tension of mediation, the agony of courtroom confrontation, and finally, the slow, patient work of reconciliation. I realized that life often delivers the harshest lessons in the most personal ways, through the people we love most. And yet, it also offers the opportunity for redemption, growth, and the reaffirmation of bonds that, though tested, can endure. I walked through the house that night, touching the furniture, the walls, the photographs, letting the memories wash over me. Each room was a repository of a life lived fully, a testament to love, endurance, and the messy, beautiful complexity of family. The house had not just survived the legal battle, it had survived the emotional storms as well. And in doing so, it became more than a structure, it became a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I paused at the doorway, looking back at the living room where my son sat quietly. I felt a swell of emotion, relief, love, and a profound sense of hope. This, I thought, is what truly matters. Not ownership, not possessions, not legal victories. But the connection we maintain, the lessons we learn, and the care we show one another. I settled into bed that night, the familiar weight of the blankets comforting against the turmoil of recent weeks. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet prayer, not for material security, but for continued wisdom, patience, and the ability to guide my family with love, even when fear or misunderstanding threatens to pull us apart. And I knew, in that stillness, that life's greatest inheritance is not gold or property, but the understanding that love, trust, and family endure when we nurture them, confront challenges with honesty, and hold fast to the bonds that truly matter. I thought of my husband, of the children I had raised, of my son beside me now, and I realized that despite the storms we face, despite betrayal, fear, and uncertainty, we can always return to the core of what it means to be a family: forgiveness, understanding, and love that persists beyond words and beyond mistakes. And as the night deepened, the house quiet and steady around me, I felt a profound sense of closure. The battles had been fought, the lessons learned, and the family, though tested, remained. I drifted to sleep with the certainty that whatever storms may come in the future, we had discovered the resilience to face them, and that is the legacy I would leave behind, not in documents, but in hearts. The house, our home, remained ours, not because of legal papers, but because of the enduring spirit of love and trust that had weathered every trial. And I knew that, in the end, it was this spirit, fragile yet unbreakable, that would carry us forward, together.